Greetings, guys. Okay, so I promised you some instructions, and with any luck, these will be clear as mud. No, I'm just kidding, but I will upload a PDF version of this slideshow. I just wanted to kind of go through it quickly to make sure that some of the things were a little bit more clarified. So in Chapter 7, we specifically want to target these discussion webs and our guided reading procedures. Not difficult concepts, but you have to understand them to be able to do this certain assignment for this class. So discussion webs, basically, according to Alverman, they're the following basic ways to guide a discussion in your classroom about a selection of text that you provide. It could be an article. It could be just a section of the textbook. It could be a book. You're doing a book club, whatever. It literally, it spans across all content. So this that I've provided you with is what Alverman says is the best way to do this with your class. So first and foremost, you're going to activate prior background knowledge, which, you should always do that. That's a best practice for any strategy. If you know you're introducing a new concept or you know something's going to be more difficult for them, go ahead and give them what you think they need as far as the basic information. If you want them to understand how a hurricane works. Well, if they aren't familiar with hurricanes at all, then you might want to give them some background as far as like even the base definition of what a hurricane is, so that when they're reading text about its destruction or whatever, they can kind of associate. Then have students read the selection you've assigned. So give them the background knowledge without having the text to begin with, and then give them their text, article, whatever you want them to read. Put the students in pairs and then ask them to create pros and cons for the question you pose from the reading. So, for example, maybe they're reading something about how this character named Malika whether or not she should enter a writing contest, and she's having conflicting decisions about it. Okay, well, the overarching question you pose might be, should she enter the writing contest? And in their little pair, they're going to create pros and cons based on the text of why she should or should not enter the contest. And the challenge is, can they do an equal amount of these? Like have the same number of pros as they do cons? Then you ask those, have maybe a couple of the pairs get together to form a small group of 4 usually, and then have them discuss and solidify their thoughts. So maybe one pair saw something another one didn't. They combine them all together and say, these are our best. This is the best argument for pro and con that we have. Then have those small groups decide on what those are. So you don't want to have 15 pros and 15 cons. Make them narrow it down. If you have to cap it at a number, then cap it, say 5 each or something. But the idea is, can they figure out what the best of each actually is? And then conduct a whole class discussion where you write their strongest pros and cons on the board, or, smart board, whatever, and come to a conclusion. So, okay, here we've got all of this information. Based on this, which one do you think is the strongest argument? Even though you've got an even split, which is the strongest with the textual evidence they have that they could use to prove their point? And that's really why you want to use these discussion webs, because it guides them to understand what is really important and how do they need to focus their argument, especially for debate, argumentative writing, whatever you're having them do. So then we've got the GRP, which is the guided reading procedure. This one emphasizes close reading, which is a personal favorite of mine. Basically, this is how you do it. You start with any necessary background information, just like the last one. Then you assign a reading selection. Now, this one, we're going to get a little more specific. So if your middle grades, like 4 through 8, is usually a good indicator. They should be able to go 5 to 7 minutes straight. That's usually 500 and 900 words of silent reading. But you can put a timer on the board, whatever you want to do, but that's their kind of cap. And for high school, we do at least 10 minutes. That's usually 1,000 to 2,000 words. And you basically give them a directive, like just read to remember everything they can from what this text is. That, nothing else, no other questions, just read for trying to remember it. As they finish the reading, just tell them hey, when you're done reading this, turn your book face down or article face down or whatever, just so they can't quickly look at it when you're asking them questions. Then have the students tell you what they remember from text. Just basically say, okay, what do you remember? And you can even jot it down on the board, or you can just have a discussion about them, whatever, you're most comfortable with. And then basically they're going to have inconsistencies. One kid is going to say, well, the main character's hat was blue. And the other person's going to be like, no, it was teal. It clearly says it was teal. Okay, that's a split difference, and that's very minute in detail and not necessarily very important, but, necessarily. But it's still an inconsistency. So after you have this discussion with them, just let them tell you things that they remember, and then say, hey, did you notice how you had these inconsistencies? You didn't notice these things. What about this? Did anybody catch this? And let them flip their book or whatever back over and point it out to them. Say, see where it says this? Well, why do you think you didn't catch it? That kind of thing. Then organize what they remembered into an outline of your choice. And I know that's very vague, but maybe you can say, what were the important ideas in the assigned reading? Like, can we organize it by you actually were able to catch the main ideas of it? Maybe you can organize it by what came first, like chronologically. Did they remember the chronological order of it? It's more, the reason it's open-ended on that is because it's more about what they ended up remembering and how you can organize it. And then extend that questioning to fit your needs. So if the whole purpose of them reading this was so that they could understand why Lenny and of Mice and Men, it has a mental incapacity, and they completely miss the point, then give them some more questions. Like, you can just say it, you can give it to them written, whatever is more comfortable for you or what your class needs, but that's going to be where you fill in the gaps. Then provide immediate feedback by giving them a short quiz. I mean, I know everybody hates quizzes or pop quizzes, but you don't have to take it as a grade, or you can as a reward. You can give it as a bonus. Say, for every question you get right, you get +1 on this daily grade or whatever, just to reinforce what they remember. Because if they immediately take a short little pop quiz, bam, 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 they will remember it. It's statistically proven. Don't ask me why, but it works every time. So then reading guides. These guides have been accused of being worksheets, but it's how you design it that makes it more than that. So basically you want to think about what you want the students to truly understand or glean from the text you're giving them. And again, this is across all areas. Doesn't matter if it's a book, it can be anything. Write questions that are thought-provoking and give them opportunity for discussion. So you can give them questions that guide their understanding to what you need them to understand from the text. Let them work through it, let them get the answers, do what they need to do on their own. If you need that extra support, put them in pairs, put them in small group, do it by Lexile, whatever you need as a teacher. But then those questions basically become their reading guides, because it shows them what's important, what they need to know. And then use those questions for discussion. You can use it in Socratic seminars, which we'll talk more about later. You can use it for debate, for how you want to gear their essay writing, whatever it is, but this is going to be the base of their knowledge. This is just a different example, because when I say it's mistaken for a worksheet, that usually happens because it'll be like, here's a question, here's an answer, here's a question, and it's not that you can't do that. They just don't need to be so basic. If you're going to do it that way, make them dive deeply into the text. But in your book, in Figure 7.15, it talks about 3-level guide they gave you the case of the missing ancestor, and it's a very short little read. It's on the page before, but they have 3 parts. First, check the statements that you believe say what the author says. Sometimes the exact words are used, and other times other words may be used. So basically, they just put a check mark 1 through 6, which ones actually say what the author says. So if they didn't understand what the text was saying, then they will not get this right. Hopefully, seeing this makes a little bit more sense. You can gear your reading guide like this. You can just give them questions that make them think more deeply, but it's based on what your students need or what your purpose is. All right, lastly, vocabulary guides. Simply put, it's anything you use to fill the gaps of vocabulary understanding. Everybody, if you're reading something and you don't understand the vocabulary, that's good. It means you're trying to extend that lexile, extend that comprehension, extend that knowledge. That's what we want. So if you're going to present a text or work that the students are going to struggle with at all due to their vocabulary acquisition, then you might give them a bank of words that they may or may not know. You could do Frere models with them, or you could literally just give them the words with the definition. You could tell them what page this is found on. If that is applicable, you can give them the quote it's used in and ask them to try to figure out what the word means based on the context it's in. It's things like that. We're going to go over more of this in the next chapter. But reading and vocabulary guides is part of your assignment for this section. So real quick, your assignment is simple. Each candidate will choose a language arts or reading, social studies, science, or health textbook in grades 4 through 12 and create a reading and vocabulary guide that is geared towards a specific grade level. Now, this won't be due until week 4. I will say this. This is the standard practice for this course. However, I am not limiting you to a textbook simply because in this time period we're in, especially with the pandemic and things, it is not necessarily the case that you have a textbook. It may just be that you pull an article or just a short read of some kind that helps redo or emphasize or further knowledge in what you're already doing. All of those things are more than okay. So it does not have to be a textbook, but all these strategies can be used across the board. They can be used in math, believe it or not. And if you have questions about that, you can throw them at me in an email or even on a discussion board. That's completely fine. And I will answer them. But hopefully this made a little bit more sense and you will feel much more comfortable going through this assignment and kind of getting your feet wet with what this chapter is about and what it means. Just email me, reach out to me. I will put a discussion board up for, hey, I've got a question about, so that everybody can see it in case somebody else has another question. But I hope you're having a great week. I look forward to seeing these in week 4. Just pace yourselves, do what you got to do, and I'll hear from you soon.